So now we've seen how to do expressions in our formal grammar for JavaScript, as well as statements like the assignment statement or the return statement or if then else. But we are not done. There is one last key element of a computer program. We need functions. And this splits into two parts. We need to know how to declare functions, to list how many arguments they take and what their bodies are. And we also need to know how to call functions in expressions. We know from experience that a Python program is basically just a list of statements and function definitions. Luckily for us, a JavaScript program is exactly the same thing, also a list of statements and function definitions. We sometimes call statements and function definitions elements because they're the key elements of a program at the top level. So let's get started on the highest level of our JavaScript grammar. A JavaScript program is either a single element, possibly followed by another JavaScript program, which is another element, so this ends up being a list of elements, and at some point we get tired and stop writing in elements. An element can either be a function definition or an arbitrary statement, just like in Python. A function definition in JavaScript starts with the word function instead of the word def. There's an identifier, that's the name of the function. You must have these parentheses. You can declare some optional parameters in there. Maybe it's a function of one variable x. I'll have to show you how to do that in a minute. And then the body of a function is just a compound statement, which we've already seen. That's a list of statements terminated by semicolons. You can also just have statements at the top level, like print hello if you're testing things out. Any statement you want, followed by a semicolon. When we're giving the definition for a function, it can have any number of formal parameters that we decide. Could be a function of x, y, and z, could just be a function of a, or it could be a function of no parameters. That's why this is optional, OPT. So an optional parameter declaration could either be some actual parameters, this is the common choice, or nothing. If we're going to have one or more parameters, here's how it goes. You can declare the names of those variables. It's a function of x, y, z. And after each one, you have to have a comma until you get to the last one, which is not followed by a comma. So we haven't hinted on this previously, but this is kind of a cute gem in context-free grammars. Note that our statements are terminated by semicolons. In a compound statement, every statement is followed by a semicolon. By contrast over here with parameters, they're separated by commas. So the last one doesn't have a comma after it. Pretty cute. We have all of the rules for expressions that we used to have before, but now we're going to add function calls. When you're calling a function, you have to give the function name, sign, print, absval, and then you pass in some number of arguments. There could be none, which is why this says optional, or there could be one or more. And you're going to see this play out in a very similar pattern to opt params. The parameters in a function declaration are always just names like x, y, or z, and then you get to refer to them in the function body. But when you're calling a function, you can put in actual values. You can call sine of 3. So we can't just reuse params. We need to make a new set of rewrite rules for actual arguments. So the arguments could be nothing, or it could be one or more arguments. If it's one or more arguments, they're going to be expressions separated by commas. So down here we had function calls, which are expressions. You could take sine of x and divide the result by 2. And up here at the top, function definitions, these happen more rarely. These are elements. This is actually pretty much it. This is the majority of our JavaScript grammar. The real devil is in the details. For example, you may have noticed that nothing in this grammar prevents you from declaring sine as a function that takes one parameter, and then later on calling it with 2 parameters. Uh-oh. More on that later.